My parents always told me I was half the woman my sister was. I believed them, until the night I dropped an $86,000 bombshell at family dinner. Stay with me as I tell you my story, and if it connects with you, don't forget to show a little love by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means more than you know. My name is Naomi Ellison. I'm 27 years old, an African-American woman living in Atlanta, Georgia. From the outside, my life probably looks normal. Steady job, quiet apartment, nothing flashy. But the truth of my story runs deeper than a simple biography. It's a story about favoritism, betrayal, and how years of being told you aren't enough can carve scars so deep you start to believe them yourself. I grew up in a house where my older sister, Danielle, was the star. She was 4 years ahead of me, tall and confident, with a sharp smile that my parents adored. I remember the way their eyes lit up every time she walked into a room. For me, it was different. I was always the shadow, the comparison, the daughter who could never quite reach the bar they set. The words still echo in my mind. Naomi, you'll never keep up with your sister. They didn't shout it. They didn't have to. They said it casually, like it was a fact, like gravity. To them, Danielle was the sun, and I was some planet orbiting far away, never shining on my own. There were so many little ways they reminded me of this. Danielle came home with a perfect report card, and my parents threw a celebration dinner. When I brought home a decent grade after struggling for weeks, they shrugged and asked why I couldn't be more like her. Danielle got a shiny new car on her 16th birthday. I still remember watching her drive off while I held the handlebars of the second-hand bike they handed me a week later, saying, "This will do for you, Naomi." Those words, "This will do for you," stung worse than any insult. They became the lens through which I saw myself. Every achievement of mine was less, every smile of mine was dimmer. And every time my parents praised Danielle, I shrank a little smaller inside. But here's the thing. The world has a funny way of flipping the script when you least expect it. For years, I swallowed their words, accepted their judgment, and believed that maybe they were right, that I was half the woman my sister was. What I didn't realize then was that the years of pain were shaping me into something stronger. And one day, at one unforgettable family dinner, I would finally show them just how wrong they had been. That was the night I dropped my $86,000 secret on the table like a match and watched everything catch fire. When I look back on my childhood, it always feels like a movie where I was cast as the extra and my sister Danielle was the star. She was the golden child, the one my parents, Malcolm and Sharon, built their entire pride around. Every small thing Danielle did was treated like magic. She brought home an A on a test, and they would beam with joy, talking about her brilliance at the dinner table as if she had solved world hunger. Meanwhile, I was right there too, but it felt like I was invisible. If I brought home a B, it wasn't good enough. If I tried out for something and didn't win, it was proof I wasn't like her. My parents didn't even have to yell at me. Their sighs and disappointed looks were heavy enough to press me into the ground. They had a word for Danielle, gifted, and a word for me, lazy. Danielle was smart, beautiful, successful. Those words were repeated so often they became a song in our household. And me? I was average, a little slow, not as driven. I learned those labels like they were my name. Sometimes my mother would pat me on the shoulder with a fake smile and say, "Naomi, you're just different, and that's okay." But I knew what she really meant. You're not Danielle. One memory sticks with me more than anything. Danielle's 16th birthday. My parents went all out. Balloons, decorations, a big dinner with relatives. And the grand surprise? A brand new car sitting in the driveway, ribbon tied neatly on top. I can still hear the cheers when she ran outside and squealed with joy. Everyone hugged her. Cameras flashed. She was glowing under all that love. A week later, when it was my turn to turn 16, there was no big party. No cameras. My father wheeled out an old, second-hand bicycle from the garage. The paint was chipped, the seat a little torn. He handed it to me and said, "This will get you around." My mom added, "It's practical for you." I forced a smile, but inside I was breaking. That bike wasn't just transportation, it was a message. It told me exactly where I stood in their eyes. Danielle got the road paved for her. I got whatever scraps they thought were good enough. It's strange how those little moments can shape the way you see yourself. I started to believe that maybe they were right. Maybe I was less. Maybe I would never be worth celebrating the way Danielle was. I carried that belief like a shadow, following me through school, through friendships, through every achievement that felt smaller because no one clapped for me the way they clapped for her. That's where the resentment began. Not loud or explosive, but quiet and steady, like water dripping on stone. Over the years, it carved me into someone who both longed for love and burned with the need to prove I deserved it. Adulthood didn't change much when it came to how my parents treated Danielle and me. If anything, the gap between us seemed to widen. Danielle grew into everything they ever dreamed of. She became a corporate lawyer with a corner office, walked into rooms with tailored suits and designer heels, and drove around in a gleaming luxury car. She even got engaged to Gregory, a man with an impressive career and the kind of smile parents adore. Every family gathering became her show. My parents couldn't stop bragging. Danielle just closed another big case, my father would say proudly. Gregory is such a catch. She's lucky, but really, he's the lucky one, my mother would add. They spoke about her like she was a trophy they had polished to perfection. Relatives would nod impressed, while Danielle soaked in the attention like sunlight. And me? I worked as a healthcare analyst. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, important work. I lived in a modest apartment and paid my bills on time. I didn't chase status symbols. My life was quiet, but I was proud of it in my own way. Still, none of that mattered to my parents. They dismissed what I did as dull. At gatherings, they would throw little jabs in front of everyone. Naomi crunches numbers all day. Very routine work, my father would say, almost with a chuckle. My mother once added, well, at least she's not starving. It's stable enough. Their words weren't just careless, they cut. They made sure everyone knew Danielle was the star, while I was barely a footnote. The worst moment came one evening when I was walking past the living room. They thought I was out of earshot. My mother was on the phone with a relative, her voice dripping with pride as she spoke about Danielle's latest accomplishments. Then she said it, the words that dug into me like knives. Naomi will never be half the woman Danielle is. I froze in place, the air heavy around me. It wasn't new for them to compare us, but hearing it so directly, so cruelly, when I wasn't supposed to hear, it broke something inside me. I stood there, silent, as if my feet were nailed to the floor. I wanted to storm in, to ask her how she could say that about her own daughter. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I carried that sentence with me like a scar I couldn't hide. That night, lying awake in my apartment, I replayed it over and over. Half the woman. It rang in my ears until the shame turned into something else, anger. I realized I couldn't keep living in Danielle's shadow, waiting for my parents to see me differently. If they couldn't, then I would have to prove them wrong. That moment became my turning point. I stopped longing for their approval and started planning for my own victory, one they would never see coming until it was too late. What my family never knew was that behind the plain life they mocked, I had built something of my own. My analyst job was steady, yes, but it wasn't my whole story. After long days at work, when most people would relax, I opened my laptop again and threw myself into something bigger, my own consulting business. It started small. I saw a gap in how healthcare organizations handled their data and systems, and I realized I could help. At first, it was just a side project, one client here, another there. I'd work late into the night, sending proposals, fixing systems, creating reports. There were times I thought about telling my parents, but then I imagined their faces. I knew exactly what they'd say, that it was a waste of time, or too much for someone like me. So I kept it to myself. For years, my business grew in silence. While my parents bragged about Danielle's courtroom victories and her luxury lifestyle, I sat quietly at the dinner table, never once mentioning the contracts I had closed or the money I had put away. They never asked, and I never offered. It was mine, and I wasn't going to let their judgment poison it. Slowly, I built up savings. At first, a few $100 extra a month. Then a few thousand. Instead of spending it, I invested carefully, stocks, mutual funds, even a little real estate. I read books, listened to podcasts, and taught myself everything I could about building wealth. Every dollar I tucked away felt like a secret weapon, waiting for the right moment. The turning point came recently, when I reviewed my business numbers for the quarter. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen in disbelief. $86,000. Net profit. In just 3 months. My hands shook as I read the numbers again, but the truth didn't change. I had done this on my own. No spotlight, no applause, no comparisons. Just me. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would feel like if my parents knew. If they could see that their average daughter had built something powerful while they dismissed me as unambitious. But then I stopped myself. I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. Their words still lived inside me, and I wanted to choose the moment carefully. So I kept the secret tucked close to my heart. On the surface, I was still Naomi, the boring healthcare analyst with nothing special going on. But underneath, I was someone else entirely, someone they had never taken the time to see. And deep down, I knew exactly what I would do with this success. It wouldn't just be numbers on a spreadsheet. It would be my answer to every insult, every dismissal, every time they told me I wasn't enough. One day, when the timing was perfect, I would drop my secret on the table and let them choke on their own words. The invitation came in a gold-trimmed envelope, the kind my parents only used for big occasions. Inside, in my mother's neat handwriting, was a request for both Danielle and me to come home for a special dinner. I already knew what it was about: Gregory, Danielle's fiancé, and her perfect little engagement. Still, I went. Part of me wanted to see if things would be different this time, if maybe they'd see me as more than just a shadow. The house was glowing when I arrived. Candles lit the dining room, polished silverware lined the table, and a feast was laid out like something from a magazine. My parents had gone all out. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt it, the shift in the air. Danielle was already there, dressed in a fitted dress, her ring catching the light with every movement. My parents hovered around her, smiling like proud royalty. "Naomi, you made it," my father said, his tone flat, as if my presence was just a formality. My mother gave me a quick hug, then turned right back to Danielle, complimenting her hair, her dress, her everything. I sat down quietly, taking in the scene. When the glasses were raised for a toast, it wasn't a surprise. "To Danielle," my father declared, beaming. "A lawyer with a six-figure salary, engaged to a man who is equally successful." We couldn't be prouder. Everyone clapped, the sound echoing louder than it should have. I sipped my wine, forcing a smile. Then came the part that always followed, the digs at me. My mother leaned over and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Naomi, maybe you'll find someone soon. Still single at 27. It's time you thought about settling." She laughed softly, as if it were a joke, but her eyes told me it wasn't. My father added, "Yes, you've always been independent, but at some point, you'll need someone to take care of you. Not everyone can be like Danielle." His words landed heavy, a familiar weight pressing down on me. And then Danielle herself, with that smug little smile she had mastered since childhood, chimed in. "Well, some people just aren't cut out for success. That's okay, Naomi. You can't expect everyone to be on the same level." She tilted her head, pretending it was kindness, but it dripped with superiority. The laughter that followed stabbed deeper than any knife. My parents didn't defend me. They joined in, letting Danielle's words hang in the air like truth. I stayed quiet, my fork pressing hard against the plate. On the outside, I looked calm, maybe even indifferent. But inside, I was burning. Every insult, every smirk, every toast to Danielle was piling up like dry wood, and I could feel the fire building inside me. I didn't lash out then. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crack. Instead, I smiled faintly, took another sip of wine, and made a silent decision. This was the night. Tonight, they would finally see me. Not the version they imagined, not the one they dismissed, but the real Naomi. And they weren't ready for what I was about to do. I sat at that table, the crystal glasses sparkling under the chandelier, the smell of roasted lamb and garlic butter heavy in the air. My parents and Danielle were still basking in the glow of their earlier toast, their laughter filling the room. I held my wine glass steady, smiling just enough to look polite, though inside I was unraveling. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I played along. I nodded when they bragged about Gregory's promotion. I smiled when Danielle flashed her ring for the 10th time, and I laughed softly at their stories, though none of it touched me. Each sip of wine calmed my nerves, helped me keep my mask in place. Then came the final jab, the one that cracked through the thin wall I'd built around myself. My mother leaned back in her chair, her voice dripping with pride as she looked at Danielle. She's the kind of daughter any parent dreams of. Then she turned her eyes on me, soft but sharp, and added, "Naomi, you could learn from her." The table fell silent for half a beat, and my chest tightened. It was the same message I'd heard my entire life, but tonight it landed differently. Tonight, I wasn't that quiet little girl swallowing her shame. Tonight, I was ready. I set my glass down carefully and turned to Danielle, my voice calm, almost casual. "Danielle, just curious, how much did you make this quarter?" She tilted her chin up, clearly delighted by the chance to brag. 72,000 after taxes, she said with a smug smile. Hard work pays off, doesn't it? The room lit up instantly. My father nodded in approval. That's my girl. My mother clapped her hands together, eyes shining. Even Gregory leaned over to kiss her temple, like she had just won some championship. It was the same chorus of applause I'd heard all my life, only louder now. I didn't flinch. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension build. I watched their faces glow with pride, watched Danielle soak it all in. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, with anticipation. The kind that comes before a storm breaks. I smiled then, the kind of smile they weren't used to seeing from me. Calm. Icy. Certain. I swirled the wine in my glass, my eyes never leaving Danielle's, and said softly, "That's impressive." I let the words hang for a moment, then leaned just a little closer. Because while they thought the conversation had ended, I knew it had only just begun. And in a few seconds, their entire view of me, the girl they thought was small, ordinary, forgettable, was about to shatter. I was ready to drop my number, and I could already imagine the silence that would follow. I let the laughter die down before I spoke, waiting until their pride had reached its highest peak. Then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I set my glass down and said, "That's funny. I pulled in 86,000 last quarter. From my business. On top of my analyst job." The room froze. Forks stopped midair, glasses hung half-raised. It was as if the words had sucked all the oxygen out of the dining room. My parents stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Danielle's smile faltered, the smug curve of her lips twitching as if she wasn't sure she'd heard me right. Then came the scoff. "Please," Danielle said, rolling her eyes. "You? 86,000? In one quarter? You're lying. Stop trying to steal attention." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply reached into my bag, pulled out the folder I had brought with me, and slid it onto the table. The sound of the papers hitting the wood was louder than it should have been. Slowly, I spread out the documents, tax statements, bank transfers, profit summaries. Cold, hard proof. "Go ahead," I said evenly. "Take a look." My father leaned forward first, his brow furrowing as he scanned the numbers. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening as she realized what she was seeing. Danielle didn't touch the papers at all. She just sat there, her face growing red, her jaw tight with fury. This can't be right," my mother whispered, her voice shaky. "Naomi, how did you?" I cut her off, my tone sharp but steady. "All those years you told me I wasn't enough. All those times you compared me to Danielle. Turns out, I'm more than you ever thought." The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. The only sound was the faint clink of Gregory setting down his fork, clearly unsure whether to speak or stay out of it. Danielle finally found her voice, though it cracked with anger. "You're making this up. You probably doctored those numbers. No way you could ever make that much. Not you." I leaned back in my chair, unbothered, and met her glare head-on. "Believe what you want. The numbers don't lie. Unlike the stories you've all told yourselves about me." My father didn't speak. His face had gone pale, his pride swallowed by disbelief. My mother shifted uncomfortably, caught between defending Danielle and confronting the truth. And Danielle, well, she was seething, her fists clenched tight in her lap as if the proof itself was an insult too great to bear. I sat there calmly, letting the weight of it all settle in the room. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking under their judgment. They were the ones squirming under mine. And it felt like the sweetest justice I had ever tasted. The silence stretched longer than I expected, until my mother finally broke it with a shaky laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, money isn't everything, Naomi. Anyone can get lucky with the right timing or a good client." She waved her hand as if she were brushing crumbs off the table, but her voice trembled. "Lucky," I repeated softly, raising an eyebrow. "Do you really think years of sleepless nights, juggling 2 jobs, and building something from nothing is just luck?" My father cleared his throat, his tone low and gruff. "It doesn't matter. Danielle's accomplishments are still more meaningful. You just stumbled into some numbers. Don't get carried away." He muttered the words like he was trying to convince himself. That was when Danielle snapped. Her face was red, her eyes blazing as she leaned forward, pointing at me. "This is pathetic, Naomi. You waited until my engagement dinner to pull some stunt like this? You're just trying to steal my spotlight because you can't stand that I finally have everything you don't." I stayed calm, folding my hands neatly in my lap. "Danielle," I said evenly, "I've never wanted your spotlight. I don't need applause, I don't need cameras, I don't even need their constant praise like you do. All I ever wanted was respect. And if it took me proving my worth in front of you tonight, then so be it. My words hung heavy in the air, but I wasn't finished. My chest tightened as I let out the truth I'd been carrying for years. Do you know what your favoritism did to me? I looked from Danielle to my parents, my voice steady but sharp. It broke me. Every insult, every comparison, every time you told me I wasn't enough. It carved holes in me that I've spent years patching up. But it also lit a fire in me. You pushed me so far down that the only choice I had was to climb up higher than you ever imagined. Sharon's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't move. My father's jaw clenched, his silence louder than any argument. Danielle's hands shook as she slammed her napkin down on the table. You're unbelievable, she spat. This was supposed to be my night. Funny, I said quietly. My whole life was supposed to be yours. The tension in the room was unbearable, so thick I felt like I was breathing smoke. No one touched the food anymore. No one dared to raise their glass. Finally, Danielle pushed back her chair so hard it screeched against the floor. She stormed out, her heels striking the tile like hammers. My mother began to cry softly, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, whispering that she didn't understand how things had turned out this way. My father just sat there, staring at the table, silent, as if words had finally abandoned him. And me? I sat in the wreckage of it all, calm for the first time in years, watching the empire of favoritism they had built crumble right in front of them. A few days passed after that dinner, but the tension didn't fade. If anything, it grew heavier, hanging over me like a cloud. I thought maybe Danielle would cool off, maybe she'd even realize how cruel she'd been. But instead, my phone buzzed with a long, bitter text. You're pathetic, Naomi. You ruined my engagement dinner just to make yourself look important. You couldn't stand that people were celebrating me, so you hijacked the night. You'll never have what I have, no matter how much money you make. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. For a second, I wanted to fire back, to remind her of every time she had been cruel to me, every smug comment, every moment she watched our parents tear me down without lifting a finger to stop it. But I didn't reply. I realized she wanted a fight, and I wasn't going to give her that power anymore. So I set the phone down and let her words disappear into the silence. Not long after, I got a call from my parents. My mother's voice was soft, almost rehearsed. Naomi, we're sorry if we made you feel less than. We didn't mean for things to go the way they did. My father chimed in, his tone clipped. We're proud of both our daughters. But I could hear it in their voices. It wasn't real. It wasn't regret. It was damage control, a thin attempt to smooth things over because the truth had slipped out too far to hide. Their apology wasn't about me. It was about preserving their image as parents who had done no wrong. I thanked them politely, but deep down, I knew the fracture between us was permanent. The strangest thing was how I felt afterward. There was no rush of triumph anymore, no satisfaction in replaying the dinner scene in my head. Instead, there was a bittersweet ache. I had finally shown them what I was capable of, but it came at a cost. My family was broken in a way I wasn't sure could ever be fixed. Revenge had tasted good in the moment, but it left behind an emptiness I couldn't ignore. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the quiet walls and thinking about what family really meant. I realized I might never get their love the way I had wanted as a child. I might never hear my parents say the words I had been desperate for all my life. But what I had gained was just as important. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had proven to myself that I was more than their labels, more than their comparisons. And slowly, another thought began to take root. Maybe it wasn't about fixing the family I was born into. Maybe it was about creating my own. A family built on love, not competition. On respect, not favoritism. One day, I would build that life. And this time, no one would make me feel like I was less. The house was quiet again when I finally let myself breathe. Days had gone by since that dinner, but the echoes of it still rang in my ears. The stunned silence, the disbelief, Danielle's red face, my parents' hollow words. I knew in my heart that nothing I said or did would ever erase the scars of growing up in the shadow of favoritism. That hurt ran too deep, etched into every childhood memory, every backhanded compliment, every time I was told to be more like her. And yet, something had shifted inside me. For years, I believed their story about me, that I was less ambitious, less worthy, less lovable. But that night proved something powerful. Their story had never been the truth. The $86,000 wasn't just money. It was evidence of everything I had quietly built while they weren't watching. Proof that their comparisons were a lie, that the scales had always been tipped, not because I lacked value, but because they refused to see it. I won't pretend it fixed everything. My parents didn't suddenly transform into the kind of people who saw both their daughters equally. Danielle didn't suddenly treat me like a sister instead of a rival. And the pain, it still lingers. I still wish, sometimes, that things could have been different, that I could have grown up in a home where I didn't have to fight for respect, where love wasn't conditional, where I wasn't measured against someone else's achievements. That ache doesn't vanish overnight. Maybe it never will. But here's the thing I realized. I don't need them to rewrite the past for me to have a future. Their favoritism shaped me, but it doesn't define me anymore. I've built something they can't take away, a life I'm proud of, built by my own hands, my own persistence, my own fire. When I think back to that night, I don't remember it as a scene of chaos or anger, even though it was. I remember it as the night I finally reclaimed my voice. The night I stopped shrinking myself to fit into the version of me they wanted to believe in. The night I stood tall and let the truth speak louder than their years of dismissal. And if there's one lesson I carry forward, it's this. Sometimes revenge isn't about shouting or fighting or even trying to change their minds. Sometimes revenge is quiet. It's living so well, so fully, that the very people who doubted you are left choking on their own words. I can't erase the pain of being the lesser daughter in their eyes, but I can rise above it. I can choose to live in a way that makes their lies irrelevant. And that, more than anything, is the sweetest victory of all. Should Naomi have cut ties and moved forward on her own? Or should she have kept trying to win her family's approval? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear what you think. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.